Tips for Truckers here, and I just wanted to give you a little basics of what's going on underneath the hood and different components and everything. And I just point out to you a couple components that you need to know about what's going on with your engine, different things look like. All right, first of all, on Cummins and Pack cars, you have this clear fuel filter here. It's got a little petcock at the bottom if you need to drain it, or if you need to burp it, get some air out of it or something. And these are the fuel lines, obviously, that go to it. But here on the Pack car, you have this secondary fuel filter. Don't ask me why. But also on Pack car and we got a bad fuel leak here. When I'm checking this out. On Pack cars and cats, if you got an old cat, this is a primer right here. And what you do is you could untwist it and then it pops up and you could kind of pump it. You have to pump it 1,000,000 times to get anything out of it. But it puts pressure into the system. You know, if you run out of fuel, you got to pump that a bunch. And also, if you run out of fuel, you got this bleeder screw here. And so, also, if you run out of fuel or you change your fuel filter, you open up this bleeder screw and you wait till it'll have bubbles coming out. And we wait till it's a steady stream of fuel coming out while you're pumping this, or while you're running the engine, or cycling the key so the fuel pumps prime. And then you close it back up when you don't have any air in the system. And these are just components of the fuel system. This is what's called a fuel rail, and it goes to the fuel injectors. Fuel injectors are inside the engine. You won't be able to get to them because it actually has a camshaft on the inside of here. It pushes down the injectors because they need so much pressure to inject the fuel into the system. All right, now over here is basically a distribution block for all your air lines and everything. Anytime you see plastic lines like this, those are always air lines. These are what's called press fittings. You could use a union press fitting. If you have a cut air line, you just cut it straight on both sides, and you use a union press fitting, and you just push the air lines, the end of the air lines into there, and it couples them, and those work all right. This is your fuse box right here. Self-explanatory. You just look at the fuses, see if there's the fuse is busted. It'll be a bunch of black stuff in there. Looks like caught a little fire in there. Anyway, this is where you add engine oil, and this is the dipstick. I'm sure you know how to read that. Around here you usually have your power steering fluid reservoir. And if you look closely, it'll say what level it should be when it's hot and what level it should be when it's cold. Basically self-explanatory. I mean, here's all your steering systems here and everything, but this fluid needs to be correct. This is an alternator. It supplies power to your battery. You know, it's run by your serpentine belt here. So if that goes bad, you know where that is. If there's this wire here broken or something, and you know, that's why you're not at 14 volts or whatever you're supposed to be at. Let's see, that's just an AC compressor down here. No big deal. So on your fan, what you have is what's called a fan clutch, and so it'll kick in your fan at the right temperature. Sometimes that'll go bad and your fan won't kick in. You need to get that replaced right away. Pretty expensive part, but it's very critical. Don't drive if your fan's not kicking in. You'll overheat. So now we're talking about the fan. This right here is the radiator. As a matter of fact, let me go to the other side and I can explain this better. Alright, now we're back on the other side, and I was talking about the radiator, I believe. Go along with the radiator is the coolant reservoir, and there'll be lines to show you how full it should be. And you never open it up when it's hot, or else it'll just spew out coolant everywhere, and you'll get a bad burn on your face. But the reservoir always has, well, usually has an overflow here, and if there's any, decent amount of coolant here in the overflow, that usually means that you have a bad head gasket or getting some blow by or something. Maybe mention that to the shop. But yeah, don't take the coolant cap off until it's nice and cool. And you got to let the pressure out. You got to open it up slowly. But anyway, going back to the radiator. This in front of the radiator is your air-to-air intercooler. And so you don't confuse it with your radiator. The radiator is always behind the air-to-air intercooler. And what this does, it cools down the air going into your engine. And it makes it a lot more efficient, gives you more power and stuff. But like I said, the radiator is always behind the air-to-air. And the way you can identify an air-to-air intercooler as opposed to a radiator is it has the inlets on the side here. And whereas the radiator usually has it, there on the top. You want to fill the radiator, have the hot water going in the radiator at the highest point, obviously. Well, maybe not so obvious. But going back to talking about the air-to-air intercooler, these couplers, or if any of these tubes aren't secured, or if they got a hole, I've had these little rings wear a hole into the couplers, and I wasn't getting any power out of my turbo. And so if you're not getting any power, that's probably one of the lowest hanging fruits you can check. And you can also check your air filters. And a Peterbilt, they're a bitch to get out, but in most trucks, they're right here by the firewall up high, and they usually have spring clips you can open up and check out the air filter, see how that's doing. Now this is, I don't know why I touched it, it's usually really hot, but this is your turbo over here, and it's your exhaust. But right here, what you have is your Egr system. And what it does, basically, it takes some of the exhaust and puts it back into the intake for emissions reasons. And so this right here is your Egr cooler. And it'll run coolant through your Egr system so that the exhaust gas going into the intake aren't as hot. You don't need to know all this, but if you see something, a leak or a sensor broken on here, you could tell the shop, hey, it's the Egr. Something's going on with the Egr. Now, don't confuse the Egr with the regular exhaust. These are this is the exhaust temperature sensor. This is a NOx sensor. And there's just usually all kinds of different sensors here. Then your exhaust goes into your diesel particulate filter, which on this truck is underneath my side steps. You can't see it, but it'll cause you a world of hurt, a bunch of problems. Basically, it's the only thing that breaks on these new trucks. And going back to the cooling system, I know it's a long video, but like I was telling you earlier, you look at the coolant pipe that goes to the top of the radiator, and you look where it goes. This is actually the air compressor for your air brakes and stuff, and it has coolant running through it because it gets hot. And usually, I want to say always, your water pump is connected to your air compressor. I think on cats, your power steering pump is connected to it too, but usually your water pump's connected. And on pack cars, this is your coolant filter. I don't know why they have one, but they do. But yeah, so it gives you an idea of air compressor and where the air compressor and water pump are and everything. And man, this video is getting long, so I want to tell you guys to have a great day, and I hope this helps you out with some components under the hood.